1500 dome in Jerusalem. Okay.
It's too early, Stefan, for recording. We still have several minutes to talk.
So now everyone will stop talking.
Of course, but we still have...
Because it's recorded.
Yeah. Oh. Hi, Paul. Hi,
Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks. And you?
I'm fine. I don't see, how's the Zoom right now? I don't see the pictures of us. Let's see.
You seem to be able to see, yeah.
Oh, I didn't have the video on.
Now I see you. Hi, Paul.
Okay, okay. I'm using my iPad. That's why I'm not familiar with. Okay, all right. Okay, the view. All right. Gallery. Okay, now I see you. Okay.
Good.
Some people again had messaged to me that some hospitalized, like Katka Chapkova, she says, I wanted to attend the talk, but she's
poor her.
Yeah. Some others also have other commitments. I mean, whatever time we arrange, still it's not fitting for everyone. We tried.
It's impossible.
Time.
Which is the
but you know, I had put it, I think 5 times in my calendar, but it was earlier, not now. It was, I think, at 15 or 1600, and never I managed. So it's good that it's Zoom.
We had last half a year 6 p.m., 6 to 7. Now, I mean Central European time. Yeah. Now 7 to 8. And previous years, because it was in person, we started like 3:15 p.m.
Exactly.
until because we had premises at Uppsala University.
Yeah.
Now we moved to Zoom. So, hi, Karola.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, it's because Stefan started to record everything. Nobody wants to talk anymore, even though we still have several minutes.
I already had a chat with Stefan saying, is anyone listening? He's like, no, and so we could really talk.
Great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too.
Yeah. No, here are 4 people, Ira people, right?
Yes.
Well, today in the Romani memories thing, there were quite a few also, because Yeleni was there, so Beata was there, so there are several also in this kind of things.
Great. Anna, where are you now?
Edmonton, Canada.
Yes.
Yeah. Since second half of November. Now it's recorded officially. And right now I am at the university, just finished my lecture.
Great.
What are you teaching?
Yeah, I'm teaching the Second World War.
Interesting.
Yeah, for now only one course, but let's see how it will go.
And Hussein, where are you?
Hussein, you are muted.
Yes, yeah. I'm here. Hello, nice to see you. Yeah, we are together in Edmonton.
Great. That's fantastic.
So
congratulations.
We have this week plus degrees and lots of sun. So things are getting better.
Good.
And Miriam, you are in Austria now, right?
Yes, exactly. I'm now, actually almost back home in Vienna. Yeah.
It's nice.
It's a nice city.
Yeah.
According to the polls, it's the best city in Europe.
Yes.
I also like Vienna very much.
It's actually beating Zurich by a narrow margin.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I always thought it's Zurich, Vancouver, and then Vienna.
No, it's Vienna and Zurich the last 2 years.
Oh, really? Yes.
Zurich,
I think because it was always a bit boring, it's still not too globalized, though I think you have all the signs. I mean, what is the disadvantages of globalization? But still, it's kind of not, and it's green. I think that also makes it different. That Trump said we live in the wood.
Well, I think all of Europe.
Edmonton, Calgary is a very nice city, they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Vancouver, because it has mountain, lake, and yeah.
And sea.
Yes.
You mean in the 51st state, US state?
So we have to move to Calgary, what I hear, or Vancouver. No, Vancouver is not really good. I mean, too expensive.
Yeah.
So shall we give it another 2 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, we usually start like 3, 4 past. I also sent, just wanted to say that I sent an email. We have here the Center for Austrian and Central European Studies. I sent an email to them about your talk, Miriam, today. I don't know if they will attend, but at least they can afterwards see the video. Yeah.
Katarina Sharkova excused herself. She's in hospital.
Yeah.
So, shall we?
Yeah, I think so. And anyway, you record already about 10 minutes. We can just continue.
Right?
4 minutes.
Just continue the conversation. Okay, I will officially start. Hello, everyone. Today is February 26, 2025, and we are again in our monthly series of interdisciplinary seminars in Romani studies, which we started in September 2022, and now organized with the Roma Foundation and Stefan Ledrich from Zurich, Switzerland, and still Uppsala University, Sweden, and Uppsala Forum, Sweden. And I'm currently at Alberta University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. And today we have a very important talk of Miriam Karoly, who is a political scientist and works at the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute for Holocaust Studies, where we first met in 2021, exactly after the COVID. The first conference was organized in person. And I'm so happy to have you, Miriam, today. And between 2013 and 17, Miriam was head of OSCE contact point for Roma and Sinti issues at the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights in Warsaw. And previously, she served as senior advisor on minority rights at the OSCE field operation in Kosovo. And of course, she focuses on Roma in Europe. And again, I want to emphasize that our talks are for academics of Romani and non-Romani origin, for students of Romani and non-Romani origin, and for community members, everyone interested in that. And Miriam, again, I'm very happy to have Miriam, not only because of your impact, Miriam, but also because we really want to have more speakers from Romani communities, from Roma, in particular women, because I think everywhere in academia, and particularly among Roma, we have very few women. And also among such great representatives of Romani communities in Europe and in the world like you. So I'm very happy to have you here. And Miriam, of course, advocates for Roma's rights. And she's the member of the Austrian delegation to the IRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And also we met, I think, in Stockholm when there was the first conference of IRA. And also Miriam serves as a member of the Austrian Ethnic Council on Roma, and she's an honorary member of Romano Center. And I would say, like, for the Queen, etc., etc., etc. And I'm very happy to have you here, and I think everyone. Miriam, floor is yours.
So thank you very much for this very warm welcome, and to Hanna Abakunova and also to Stefan Lederich, who invited me for this talk, and of course for the organizers. Yes, I would like to make a presentation about Roma activism for change, experiences from Austria. And I have to say, since I was engaged myself in the Austrian Roma civil society for many years, I might be too long. I prepared something, but I'm happy if you think it's getting too long, please interrupt. And you might also say, can you just come to an end and we maybe go into a discussion. But I will start just right now, immediately. So, in the night from the 4th to the 5th February 1995, 4 Roma men returned to their homes in the Roma settlement in Oberwart, which is placed in the vicinity but apart from the city Oberwart. On the crossroad, they saw a racist sign saying, "Roma back to India." When they tried to remove it, a hidden bomb attached to it killed the 4 men, Erwin Horvath, Karl Horvath, Josef Simon, and Peter Sarkozy. This bomb attack was the most severe politically motivated terror attack in Austria after 1945. This year, we commemorate 30 years of the racist attack on Roma in Austria, a sad event which became a turning point of Austria's approach towards Roma. It happened just 2 years after Roma got the status of an ethnic group, a milestone for Roma civil society. Over centuries, Roma in Austria were affected by negative anti-Roma policies and administrative measures, restricting their rights as equal citizens, fostering their continuous expulsion from municipalities, putting them at the edge of society, labeling them as criminals and asocial people, and paving the way to their racialization, persecution, and extermination under National Socialism. In Austria, almost 90% of the Roma population were killed during the Holocaust. There were only few survivors, around 600 to 1,000 people, who returned from the slave labor or extermination camps. The survivors returned to a hostile anti-Roma climate. The Austrian post-war society refused justice to the Roma victims of Nazi crimes and continued with anti-Roma policies. To give an example, in 1948, only 3 years after the end of World War II, the Austrian Ministry of Interior issued an order to expel all Roma people on Austrian territory who had no papers or were found wandering on the streets, disregarding the fact that the majority of Roma in Austria were murdered. Later on, in the 1960s to 1980s, Roma were neglected by policy measures or refused recognition to benefit from legislation. This applied to their status as victims of racial Nazi persecution, denial for compensation, the lack of acknowledging their sufferings in official memory politics, and denial to be recognized as an ethnic minority in Austria. The refusal for recognition stands for the continuous anti-Gypsyism in post-war society, government and administration, and reinforced anti-Roma prejudice. A change was triggered only in the late 1980s, when Roma started to mobilize and advocate for equal rights and non-discrimination. The advocacy efforts first centered around full recognition as racial victims of the Holocaust, demanding compensation and political apology, and soon focused on the demand to be recognized as an Austrian ethnic group, along with other recognized minorities in Austria. So I would say the early 1980s is a kind of awakening of Roma civil society, or you might want to name it revolt against forgetting. In Germany, in 1982, the Federal Chancellor Helmut Schmidt publicly recognized the racial persecution of Sinti and Roma after a longer struggle for recognition and public protest actions of the German Sinti and Roma. Protagonists of these actions were survivors of the Holocaust and their children. For example, Vincent and Oskar Rose, Romani Rose, or Melanie Spitter, and of course others. In Austria, the Roma civil rights movement followed a different course than in Germany. But here too, it was Holocaust survivors who initiated the confrontation with the past and asked for a change. As said earlier, only around 600 to 1,000 of the 11,000 Roma, Sinti, and Lovara living in Austria before 1938 survived the Nazi period. In the first 3-4 post-war decades, only few individuals engaged to collect testimonies of survivors, but only in the mid-1980s, historians, researchers, and Roma individuals and the Camp Association stepped up their calls to demand recognition of the racial persecution of Roma. A first victory was achieved in 1984 with the erection of a memorial at the site of the former forced labor camp Lackenbach in Burgenland. The Lager Lackenbach was only erected for the deportation of Roma in Austria, mainly Burgenland Roma. There were around 8,000 at that time in Burgenland. The Roma were deported to concentration camps from the camp Lackenbach to Łódź and from there to Auschwitz or other extermination camps. After 1945, survivors who were in Lackenbach were denied compensation. And here you see on the slide this first memorial which was erected in Austria in Burgenland, actually at the site of the former concentration camp or slave labor camp. A year later, in 1985, a commemorative stone was installed in Salzburg at the site to which Sinti and Roma were deported before they were further sent to the camp Max Klan and then to Auschwitz-Birkenau. In this slowly changing environment towards the end of the 1980s, Chaya Stoica, a Lovara woman and Holocaust survivor deported with her family to Auschwitz-Birkenau, Ravensbrück and Bergen-Belsen, drew attention to the Nazi persecution and genocide of Roma and Sinti and Lovara in Austria. In her book, in German it's Wir leben im Verborgenen, in English it would be We Live in Hiding, which she published in 1988, which you can see here on the slide. Her story heightened public awareness of the fate of the Roma and Sinti and contributed to the public debate on the prevailing anti-Gypsyism and the failures of the Second Republic of Austria. Chaya Stoica was the first Roma woman who went public with the plight of Roma in Austria, but she was not alone. Two of her siblings, Karl and Mongo Stoica, who had also survived the Holocaust as children, fought with their art and writing for recognition and against forgetting. And here in the slide, you can see, first of all, her very first book. She then wrote also others, but this was the very first one where she talked about Roma in Austria. And the second is that you see the picture, which is the kind of final or solution in Auschwitz, which she painted, and it's now in the collection of the Vienna Museum. So she was also a painter, and she was a child when she was in the concentration camp, and you can see on the picture that a lot is done from the perspective of a child, but her pictures are very interesting because they narrate actually the persecution, but also later on the life of Roma in Austria. In addition to these people I just mentioned, a small group of Roma from Burgenland and Vienna, representing the second and third generation, started to become organized and engaged in public debates in the late 1980s. They advocated for the recognition as a racially persecuted Nazi victim so that they get recognized as such, and demanded equal rights and opportunities to end racism and discrimination, and above all, called for the legal recognition in Austria as an ethnic group. An important impetus to the confrontation with history of the Nazi persecution in Austria was in 1988 which was called the Gedenkjahr, the Year of Memory. When in a speech at the memorial in Lackenbach, Federal Chancellor Fred Vranitzky admitted Austria's complicities in the Nazi crime. This was important because it's one turn in the political narrative of Austria that he acknowledged that Austria was also responsible and not only a victim. But he didn't say that Roma were racially persecuted. Finally, in 1989, the first Roma organization, Verein Roma, an association of Roma, chaired by Ludwig Pape, was founded in Oberwart, Burgenland. And, okay. Oberwart had at that time, maybe I'll go back to, so you can see, it was the very first slide. Here you see the signpost to the Roma settlement or neighborhood Oberwart, and then you see here the settlement. I will come back to it, but just that you can picture what I'm talking about. Oberwart had at that time a Roma community of around 120 persons. The neighborhood, though, was spatially segregated from the city Oberwart, and the Roma citizens suffered discrimination and exclusion in many areas of life. It was the only bigger community which was re-established after 1945. And their houses had been moved several times, especially in the 70s, to make place for bigger construction projects, which increased geographical segregation. When the municipality decided to move the topographical sign to another place, and this way excluding the Roma houses from the city, so mainly it kind of separated it so that the settlement would have been outside, few local activists, Ludwig Pape, Susanne Barana, and other supporters, wrote a letter to the president protesting against this exclusion. This was in 1987. In the same years, protesters removed the topographical sign to show solidarity with the Roma community, this way triggering a broader, locally at least, public debate. The Roma activists in Oberwart worked locally to improve the situation of Roma in Oberwart. They focused mostly on discrimination in the labor market and education and tried to advocate for recognition as an ethnic group. This was, of course, done in collaboration with others who lived in Vienna or elsewhere. So there was a small network of Roma individuals who tried to bring this vision forward. 2 years later, in 1991, two further organizations were founded. The Kulturverein Österreichischer Roma with Rudolf Sarkozy. He himself, being a Burgenland Roma, was very committed to address the situation of Roma in Burgenland. But he also had political ties to the Social Democrats and was himself a party member, which was very instrumental to the process to get a status as a minority in Austria. The second organization, founded in 1991, was Romano Centro. Different than the two other organizations, from the very beginning, it was set up by a broad board representing the diversity of Roma in Austria. So autochthonous and allochthonous Roma communities, also from different groups, like there were Calderash, Gobetti, Lovara, Burgenland Roma, and so forth, which addressed, so Romano Centro addressed the situation of Roma locally in Vienna, but also oriented its work to more European-wide Roma policies and advocating for Roma rights at international level. Romano Centro became a strong and diverse forum for collaboration between different generations and group of Roma. The first chairperson was Ilya Jovanovic, a poet and writer from Serbia. Then it was Dragan Jefremovic, a Calderash. And today, actually, I mean, there were several in between, but just to also show the dynamic, it's chaired by a woman, Rabia Peric-Yasha. A further important association, and I just want to mention it, although it was founded later, was Ketani, co-founded by Rosa Gita-Martl, established in 1998. Her mother, Rosa Winter, was a Holocaust survivor, forcibly recruited with 50 other children from Salzburg Max Klan labor camp as extras for Leni Riefenstahl's film Tiefland. She escaped and was initially detained in the police prison near Salzburg and then transported in 1941 to Ravensbrück concentration camp. In April 1945, she managed to flee during the forced march from Ravensbrück satellite camp to Schwarzenforst. Despite her fate, until 1991, she was refused Austrian citizenship and the possibility of receiving any victim's pension. And I just want to mention it because they were very important. They ceased to exist a few years ago, but it was an organization which particularly represented the interests of the Sinti around Linz. So the people around these 3 or 4 organizations at the very beginning joined forces to advocate for getting the status as a minority ethnic group in Austria. So the early 90s, I would call as building up structures and continuous work. In 1993, Roma finally received the status in Austria as an ethnic group. The financial subsidies associated with this made it possible to start continuous work and political lobbying. The rights of minorities are regulated in 2 main legislations in Austria. With the new state treaty in 1955, Article 7, the Slovenes and Carinthia were given status as a minority, putting them in the position to gain support for promoting their language and culture. In 1976, Austria made a major reform of minority rights framework with the new Ethnic Group Act for the benefit of a more coherent legislation for all minorities in Austria. This meant for the Slovenes, Croats, Hungarian, Czechs, and Slovaks. However, at that time, Roma were left out and denied minority status with the argument that due to their nomadic lifestyle, they don't fulfill the criteria of having a specific traditional territory. So they are not autochthonous, nor organizations representing their interest to preserve and promote their language and culture. So they were saying they're missing a organizational substrate. This irrespective the fact that in particular the Burgenland Roma were settled under the Empress Maria Theresia in the 18th century already. This also triggered, or this also explained why it was so important at that time to establish organization, because Roma wanted to demonstrate we also have an organization representing our interests. The new self-awareness suffered as, so then finally in 1993, Roma managed to get the status as an ethnic minority in Austria. However, this new self-awareness suffered a severe backlash as a result of racially motivated bomb attack on Roma in Oberwart in February 1995, which I just mentioned at the beginning. And you see, it's just 2 years after the recognition as an ethnic group. The attack highlighted the continuing anti-Gypsist hate and also revealed clear shortcomings and a lack of responsibility by politicians and society. It also was a big backlash, as many Roma felt we should not have gone public or asked for being recognized as a minorities, as now we are exposed and we are put in danger. However, the attack brought also high media attention to the plight of Roma in Austria and triggered a broader public debate and political commitments to amend the situations. In longer terms, the media reporting educated the Austrian society, explaining who Roma are and about their history, including explaining that they belong to the Austrian identity, that they are no strangers, but Austrian citizens. And there are studies about it. It's actually quite interesting that the first media portrayed Roma as foreigners, you know, and only later on, so the media educated themselves in this course of the debate about this attack. Over the years, the persistent work of the main organizations and Roma individuals brought creative and important results. It enabled the standardization of the language of the Burgenland Roma, which is now taught as a free subject in Burgenland, to work on countering racism and discrimination at local and national level, to ensure consistent work addressing social issues and promoting education for Roma children. to promote culture and language, produce media in Romani language, including within the national broadcast, conduct projects researching the Roma Holocaust and commemorating the victims, consult and train administrations, politicians, and general service providers, work on empowering Roma community and particularly youth, and so forth. And of course, also to collaborate to advocate for Roma rights with broader European-wide Roma networks and influence policies addressing Roma. Some of the projects led to sustainable change and successes. One big success, for example, was the educational aid in Burgenland. And it was very interesting because by 1985, all children from the Roma settlement in Oberwald, for example, went to special schools. But also after this bomb attack, there were a lot of resources, of course, given also that they could build up some educational aid and there was more attention. And so this has really totally changed until today. Not the same in Vienna. That's why I can't say it's overall, but at least in Burgenland, there was a tremendous improvement. So in this regard, the advocacy for the recognition as a minority in Austria became also a tool for empowerment and self-organization. Let me also mention that it was very difficult to receive recognition as racial victims of the Holocaust and with regard to compensation. Also because the law on compensation is very complex and there are many hurdles in order to receive this compensation. So many of the Roma or most of the Roma survivors were left with their trauma and never saw any support. Only in 1995, a national fund for the victims of the Holocaust were established, enabling all those to get support or a kind of financial gesture who had yet not received any compensation. However, at that time, most of the survivors were already dead. Then the period from 2000 to 2020 up to now, I call it a bit trying to influence policy measures and testing. In the early 2000 to 2020, several other Roma organizations and initiatives emerged, sometimes responding to local, for example, citywide funding opportunities or national funds. So it was very interesting to see that in the 2010, suddenly we had 15 Roma organizations popping up here in Vienna, which also was very interesting and I think a very creative testing phase. But they stayed as long as they had funding from the municipality. And then when this was dried out also for political changes and so didn't further exist anymore. And many of them, and that's why I said they kind of responded to what was funded. You know, there was fund made available for a certain topic. So then suddenly there were organizations and they tended to do what the funding was meant for, not from a genuine approach that what are the interests we want now to represent. But still, I think some of them worked very good. And also at national level, there were several organizations popping up when there was European social funds made available through national funding streams. But many of them disappeared and only few of them were really sustainable, such as, for example, Romane Tana or others. Not all of them only driven by Roma, but involving Roma. However, all of them joined forces to advocate for the establishment and implementation of Roma inclusion strategy in Austria, following the adoption of the EU framework and national Roma policies in 2011. The strategy was in particular important as the minority rights legislation, Ethnic Group Act, has some shortcomings in addressing the needs of Roma community in Austria. First, the minority rights framework has a very conservative interpretation and by law focuses only on autochthonous ethnic groups, which is defined as a community living over 3 generations in Austria, so almost 90 years. Thus, it leaves out many Roma who came to Austria within the migration trend since the 1960s. And later all, for example, we had quite an influx during the wars in the Western Balkans. But then later on, also with the EU enlargement from Bulgaria and Romania or Slovakia, which of course is a neighboring country. So today, the estimated number of Roma is still 30 to 50,000, but I think it's not a very reliable number because this is reported since 3 decades now. Second, the minority framework focuses on the promotion and protection of culture and language. Thus, it was helpful, particularly with regard to language projects, sustaining work and intercultural projects, but it is not flexible enough to cover broad human rights issues or social needs of Roma. In fact, the Roma civil society was very active in shaping the priority goals of the Austrian strategy for Roma inclusion. Romano Centro in particular could utilize the national implementation for stronger local outreach and targeted service-oriented work to address education and employment of Roma, but also to work on empowerment of Roma women and youth. The strategy was updated in 2017, aligning with the EU framework for national inclusion policies, and is still in place. It's now prolonged until 2030. The Roma civil society also became the key partner for implementing measures and projects aimed at improving the situation of Roma and fighting racism and discrimination. So the national strategy on inclusion was actually developed 20 years after the recognition as a minority, and it builds on the accumulated experience of the civil society and the work they had done so far. And this you can see that actually it was drafted around the mayor projects led by Roma civil society. So of course this was also a bit tricky because it showed that there was not much investment from the federal state, but they rather said what we are anyway already funding, we continue doing. On the other hand, the Roma communities could say this is what we focus on because of particular needs, and they could attract additional resources for this, at least for a while. The updated strategy in 2017 puts emphasis on participation of Roma civil society, in particular youth and women, and to fight anti-Gypsyism. As I mentioned before, the success of every policy depends on political will and resources committed to it. I would say the EU framework inspired for a very interesting dynamic, especially in the first decade in Austria, so from 2011 onwards. It empowered the Roma civil society who actively engaged in lobbying their interests into the strategy. And it gave, of course, more visibility to the work of the Roma, at least up to 2020. Now, I would say there is much less dynamic after 2020. And at the moment, I would almost say it's not of relevance. A sign for this is that the bigger Roma dialogue platform meetings did not continue after pandemic, nor was there a process to redefine the goals of the strategy approach. Disregarding the evaluation results of the strategy and particularly the impact the pandemic crisis had on many Roma families, in particular also children in Austria. In the last 2 decades, and I have prepared a slide for this. So in the last 2 decades, the younger 3rd and 4th generation, as well as individuals inspire with art or political interventions, and they enlarge their activism in influencing public debates about Roma and challenged also the existing images and narratives. Already in 2015, a younger group of Roma individuals who engaged around Romano Centro became a driving force in commemorating the 2nd of August commemoration at the Chaya Stoica place in Vienna. You can see it below in this picture. This is a place which was really, is named after Chaya Stoica. And now there we have since 2015 every year a commemoration on the 2nd of August. Of course, these young people were inspired by the European-wide Dictena with their initiative. Some of them founded in 2022 the organization HÖR, which is a students' organization of Roma who focuses on empowerment in the tertiary education, but they also came up with very interesting and new forms of interventions, including in the digital space and finding different agencies to collaborate. And I think it's very interesting because they really managed to also find totally new alliances. So you can see a total shift also in the way they organize themselves. Also, the actresses and singers Sandra and Simonida Selimovic from Roma Nosvato, inspired with their artistic contributions, challenges existing stereotypes, including about gender roles and images about Roma women and society. And then the organization Voice of Diversity around Perestroika has a different approach, trying to promote non-discrimination with engaging people in cultural workshops and events promoting diverse Romani culture and understanding. Over the years, some of the organizations have specialized responding in their local context and in strategic objectives. And there has been a very creative dynamic in some of these organizations. I mentioned earlier, Roma Centre, for example, is now female-led, and actually all of the people working there are Roma women. It's very interesting. They also have totally changed the focus. Much has been achieved so far. Still, there's work ahead. Currently, there's a joint, collaborative, strategic advocacy goal which connects with the very specific history of all Roma in Austria and with which I would like to finish my presentation. And this is that we are currently actually advocating all together for a memorial for Roma murdered under the Nazi regime in the capital, in the city center of Vienna. And here I put a picture where you see actually the memorial from Berlin erected in 2012. And down I put a picture just to make also history of it, because this is something where we Roma have chosen as the preferred place. It's called Schmerlingplatz. It's just opposite of the parliament. We have still not given up on it. We are now since 2 years in discussion with the authorities. At the moment, it doesn't seem that this will happen there, but still I want to put it here also to mark where actually this was the first choice of the Roma community in Austria. This process also for this having this memorial shows how difficult it is, besides all the work done so far in the last 30 years, to come to terms with the past and putting Roma in the middle of the center of the city. So thank you. I end here.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for a very interesting talk. And do we have questions or comments or both? I don't see hands, but Hannah. Okay, great. Let's start with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your presentation. I just want to say I'm from Burgenland. I'm just 30 minutes away from Oberwart, and it's such an important topic. And because I remember I still grew up with people using discriminating terms, and also I'm sure you noticed, I think up until like a few years ago, there's still like certain snacks that were named after like discriminating terms.
Yes.
And yeah, so thank you so much for your work and everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I saw the hand of Karola, thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Miriam, for these insights. I think it's very important also to get to know more about this really important and symbolic places like Oberwart. I think here we really have the connection between the persecution during the Nazi time, because there was also a survivor among the victims, as far as I remember.
No, second generation.
A second generation both.
Yeah.
And yes, but the survivor lost his son. That's the family was affected.
Yeah.
And also we found out recently that Chaya Stoica presented her book for the first time in Oberwart in December 1988. This was the premiere. So this is, I think, a very important place, and I wonder whether there is more memorial initiatives. They have regular meetings there, and how is it well regarded in Vienna, in the capital, by the politicians? Because I think the awareness should be also very high for that.
Yeah. So actually, it's commemorated every year on the 4th of February in Oberwart. There's a commemoration taking place also this year because of 30 years. There was a bigger commemoration, and including actually there's an initiative for minorities, a very interesting organization. They did an exhibition already last year, which calls Bombs Against Minorities, because the bomb attack on Oberwart was the most severe, but it was within a series of letter bombs sent to member of minority community members in Austria. And there was an exhibition made about that, and they just moved to Oberwart around this, which I think brought also, it was very interesting to see in which political environment these bombs had happened. And also, we in Austria, we are just after the elections. You probably have heard that we have quite a strong support for FPÖ, and it was very interesting because when this happened in Burgenland in 1995, first the media even reported that this was probably, some criminal activities within the Roma communities, and they were under saying that probably there were weapons smugglers and something has happened. So they investigated in the wrong direction. And that was also because, also the FPÖ strongly spoke about this at that time. And so now we had this exhibition there, which I think was very important. But in general, I would say the commemoration is locally done and not so much publicly. Right now, I think it would be good, as you mentioned, that, that there's also a really denunciation from the political body strongly more public, so that it gets to the wider attention. Because when, I don't know, we do trainings with teachers or people who are, I don't know, going to teach, they wouldn't know about it anymore. I'm happy that Hannah mentioned it from Burgenland, but I think it's not anymore a common knowledge. This year it will be a bit bigger because the Roma from Oberwart also proposed that this will be on the 8th of April, that in the parliament there will be an event on the occasion of the 8th of April, and this will be dedicated to the bomb attack. But I just want to mention one thing, because often we have these people like J.R. Stoiker who are more known, or Karl Stoiker, and European-wide also because of their great work. But in fact, Oberwart was, I think, a very, very important place, and there were few people. I tried to mention some by name. Some, there are of course some more, like Eddie Karoly in Vienna, who never became very famous, but he was one of the people who from the very beginning worked very hard on getting Roma together, and also to kind of to lobby for the getting the minority status. And he was also very instrumental because he worked at the Ministry of Social Affairs, for example, and through his work had many links to Roma communities throughout Austria. And so he could also bring them together. And we often overlook that, there are many people, and so Oberwart was very important, and some people here in Vienna, and also one in Carinthia, who kind of, it started, I think, with a small group of people, actually, not a big thing, but they had a vision and they went for it, and then people joined in.
Thank you, Stefan.
Yes, so first of all, I want to say that I know Romano Centro since pretty much its beginnings. And actually, Dragan was the president of the foundation, the Roma Foundation, between 93 and 99. So we have common backgrounds as such, very much. But the remark I wanted to do is that the argumentation of the Austrians that the Roma, because they're traveling, they have no attachment to the land, etc., has been used 3 years ago by Switzerland to not recognize Roma as a Swiss national minority. Exactly the same arguments. They have no attachment to the country. They were never there, and so on. So exactly the same type of arguments, which were, I would say, more excusable in the 80s, are inexcusable in the 2020s.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And so what did you do now in Switzerland?
Well,
we'll give Austria as an example.
Now, the only thing we're trying to organize, because I mean there are at least 100,000 Roma in Switzerland with a Swiss passport in the meantime. So we're trying to mobilize the Roma on the 8th of April, not this year, but the year after, to have a few thousand in front of the Swiss Parliament.
Yes.
To do a manifestation, a political manifestation. Let's see if we succeed, because here the racism is still so strong that it's very difficult to motivate people. And a friend told me, his doctor, actually a surgeon in a hospital, cantonal hospital, he said, it's more than enough to be Yugo around here.
Yeah. But it's very interesting because, in fact, I mean, like with regard to Austria, so according to the law, you have to have an autochthonous territory, like the Slovenes in Carinthia and the Croats in Burgenland. And for the Roma, I mean, in this discussion, then for the recognition, we could prove that they were, already under Empress Maria Theresia sedentary in the place of Burgenland, but actually they are recognized as a minority all over the country. Of course, also because you had Lovara, who had an ambulant work and so on. But I mean, coming to this, I think what we have now a discussion is that, of course, it is also always, reflecting the political agenda, but in fact, this kind of very strict legislation does not reflect at all the situation of minorities anymore. And I mean, including the autochthonous minorities in Austria. So you have many Croats, of course, they don't live all in Burgenland. Many move to Vienna or to other parts, and still will benefit from this. And we have a discussion that actually there should be a reform. Yeah.
Well, at least in Switzerland, what they're saying is that, they're documented since 1418, but those were not Roma, they were Sinti. Other discussion, but good.
Yeah, it requires another discussion and talk. Actually, I'm thinking that probably we can organize in June kind of round table. Then we can discuss different case studies rather than presentations and talks, but we think about that. Paul.
Thank you. It's the first time I hear that to declare a group of people a minority in a state, it's contingent that they are localized in a certain area. How can that be? It's still valid in 2025 in the Constitution of Austria?
Yes, like in Austria, yes, this is the case. So we have still this law from 1976, which is applicable. And I mean, from the history, you can explain from a historical, development, because, when borders were drawn, you had certain minorities in countries like, for example, the Slovenes in Carinthia.
Okay.
And then after the constitution in 1955, of course, there was an interest to kind of give them a certain status so they can still speak their language and culture. So that was actually, I think, the idea behind. And of course, the state didn't want, and I think it's actually quite similar in Germany, that so-called new minorities could ask for specific rights. Meaning, for example, we have a discussion here with Poles, also the Hungarians in Vienna, which are actually also benefiting from the law, though many came from 1956 to Austria. Yeah, so this extends already, But yes, but it is in fact in line with constitutional law here too.
One extra point. What does the Constitution say? Because the Constitution is higher from a law. Are there any provisions in the Constitution that guarantee minority rights to somebody who declares that I'm a minority or to a group?
Yes, actually there was a kind of Staatszielbestimmung. There was a particular article put in. I don't recall the year anymore. It might be 2010, but I might be wrong. Which says that actually it's interesting. It says the recognized minorities in Austria are protected. So they kind of reaffirmed that those who are recognized under the law, they are also protected by constitutional law.
Thank you.
And now the Roma included.
It's very interesting. Also, I see similarities with Italy. When Paola Trevisan presented her book, she also mentioned that one of the reasons why Roma and Sinti in Italy couldn't get the citizenship is because of the accusation in roaming, wandering, nomadism. I mean, different terminology, but exactly the same, and also that they are foreigners, meaning that all those Slovenian and Croatian Roma who arrived in Italy. I see very many similarities with Austrian case. Only the difference, huge difference, that in Austria you could organize the movement to fight with it, and in Italy, no.
Yeah. But I think there's a little difference. So yes, we could kind of get a recognition for the autochthonous group, which are mainly Burgenland, Roma, Sinti, and Lovara, but not for all the others. Yeah, that's why I mentioned that actually there's a shortcoming when you address Roma in Austria, because today the majority are Roma who migrated since the 1960s. In fact, it's quite funny. I mentioned that according to the law or the legal opinion, it has to autochthonous means 90 years, and soon we will have other communities here for 19 years too. But what they really try to restrict it to the autochthonous communities, Burgenland, Roma, Lovara, and Sinti, and not extend it to Caldarasha. And so that's why, for example, we found it very important to have this Roma inclusion strategy, because for the first time, this was kind of a policy framework which allowed also, to enlarge the work and particular target Roma who are not autochthonous communities, but living here also, and having citizenship even, Austrian citizenship. And also actually managing to get funds in order to do some services, which was before very difficult. And it's not sure that it will sustain, but yeah.
Also, it's amazing. I see, Stefan, your hand, but just wanted to add that it's amazing how also young Roma could be organized. I think I just recently talked to ARKA, Ukrainian youth organization. Yeah, they wanted to attend the talk, but they had some other meetings at the same time. And I understand that in Ukraine now, we have kind of example of Austria for such youth organizations among Roma. So Austria really gave a very important example how to organize not only for fighting but also for spreading information. And in regard to this, I have a question. For so many years, I don't know if you have any data, but just I wanted to ask. There should be kind of sociological questionnaires regarding the attitude to the Roma and Sinti from non-Roma and Sinti, from other Austrian citizens. And if you know about such questionnaires, how the situation had changed before the movements started and after.
So that's a very interesting question, and I'm now wondering whether I could find something where you really have, always the same questionnaire applied. And I wouldn't know. I have I have really to research myself. What I can tell you is, I mean, of course, there's this European barometer, which is done regularly. But it's also about Europe and then giving, of course, an insight into Austria. But recently, actually, we have the documentation archive of the Austrian resistance, DÖF, and they have put forward the extremism report right now at the end of the year, and which is a bigger sociological study. And here I could actually ask whether they have done it before, whether they have done it like 30 years ago already. It would be interesting. But what for me was actually shocking that still Roma were under the first two cohorts where people said, I would not want to live next to a Roma person. The other group, which was really heavily discriminated, are the Muslims now in Austria. So this was really on Austria. It's the extremism report, which also, ask, who would you least want to have a neighbor and all this. And then Roma were also very up. And for me, that was shocking to see because, in fact, I mentioned before, we don't know exactly the number, but we are not many. Yeah, it's not a very visible community here in Austria, but still it shows how much the stereotypes still exist, the notion and what is in their minds. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to see this difference, I don't know, to monitor every 5-10 years, because so much efforts applied to fight with those stereotypes. And eventually we have to see if really those efforts reached non-Roma.
That's true. Yeah. Yes. Very good point. So you inspired me. I will look whether there was something done before by this organization, at least, because then it would be comparable. Mm-hmm.
And Stefan?
The one remark about the Kalerasha. The first one are documented in Austria in 1904, so it's a bit more than 90 years, just by the way.
Cool.
But on the minority and the localization, how did they square the circle with the Jews? Recognition of Jewish minority.
The Jewish community here didn't want to be recognized as a minority.
Okay.
So it's not, no, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments?
Maybe one remark on the statistics. In all former count K, all the statistics, because there are some in Slovakia. The latest one in Slovakia just came out, and 82% of the Slovaks would not want to rent their flat to Roma or live next to Roma. So they're fairly consistent. The only change that is notable is that in some countries like Poland, now the least popular minority are the Russians. But apart from that, generally Roma are even before Muslims all over Eastern Europe.
Some other remarks, comments, notes? Maybe Miriam, you want to... Vinta, yeah.
Hey, could you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you for the really great presentation. I'm from Cambodia. I'm currently a student at Uppsala, studying international humanitarian action, and I don't know much about the Roma, so thank you for giving a great presentation. I'm also curious, maybe similar to previous questions, if you've found a similarity of the Roma community and like other ethnic group like the Rohingya, for example. They are still currently stateless and they're not recognized by their government. And I wonder if you've come across any of the findings that could be transferable for their past to become a recognized ethnicity.
I mean, that's a very difficult, very blunt, no. But I think also it's very difficult question, because I think you have to look particular also into what is the framework, the legal framework, which kind of minority rights framework exists, and they are globally quite different. Like, for example, in the Americas, you would have a totally different concept, which is on indigenous people and so. And I think it's important to say that Roma, some of course were stateless, but actually they are citizens of each of their countries. And I mean, they were stateless, some of them before or even today, because some municipalities would refuse or they wouldn't have a birth certificate in order to register.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No,
But I
no.
see Karola maybe has an idea. I see her hand is up.
Yeah, no, just a very, very quick idea. I think there's also not a lot of research on that, how there are allies fighting together against discrimination and racism. And there's a new publication in Germany, which is on Black, Jewish, Muslim, and Roma communities fighting against racism after 45. And I think this is something interesting also for us as historians and scientists to look at. This, but only in German, of course. But I put it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning this. This is what I wanted to say before with regard to Roma youth, when I said they have totally different forms of solidarities. Like they made a big party, for example, with Muslim and Jewish community, and they do together broad events. I mean, good, great events. And I think that is really new now. And you see also that it is very, I don't know, yeah, this brings a total new dynamic. You know, I think the topics get more broader reception, which I think is also very, very important. When there was the event, not the attack on the 7th of October, for example, the Roma community here, the youth went to make a specific initiative, and I think that was very well received. And you know, I think that is a really new forms of solidarity.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see any more hands, and I think we can finish here exactly on time, almost. And thank you so much, Miriam, for this very inspiring presentation, because what really you have done in Austria is very impressive. I mean, when I'm thinking what can be done in Ukraine, yeah, we have to take the example of Austria, of course. Yeah.
Thank you very much also for all the good commenters and discutants. Thank you for listening.
Thanks. Goodbye.
So thank you so much, everyone. And the next lecture will be March 26th.
So, by the way, reserve the last Wednesday of each month. These are the lecture. We're trying to keep to put a rhythm so that people can actually get that in their agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone, for questions and comments. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Stefane.
Ja, bis dann. Wir
Bis
sprechen.
dann. Ciao.
Ciao.